Hey everybody, Tony D. Happy Halloween, and in honor of Halloween, and in honor of I just saw Razor Fist read a Solomon Kane story, and I thought I would read a Jersey Devil story. Now, for those of you who don't know, my first comic was The Jersey Devil, and that was about a guy who sort of takes on the mantle of the Jersey Devil, and he's he's kind of like Batman with no money. And he roams around in the Pine Barrens with a staff with the word "truth" on it, and he kind of fights crime, but he also kind of fights supernatural stuff. So I wrote some short stories. Link in the description with the character, which you can read on top of reading the comics if you'd like to get the comics. This is on my site, thefixsite.com. So I thought I'd read you one of the stories, short stories called "When He Collects." All right, and this is in 1997, so I apologize in advance if I have problems reading it, if I made some sort of massive typo or whatever. But I'm pretty sure I remember the story and how it went. All right, it's "When He Collects." JD looked more bear than man sitting in the signless Two Fork Diner on the last blustery day of October. Dirty flannel, shaggy hair, and a beard that had grown to mountain man proportions. He greeted the diner's owner, Charlie, with as much friendliness as he could muster, which means he ignored him. "You wolfed down the first sandwich," said Charlie, fishing to start a conversation. "Like you ain't ate in 2 days." It had been more like 3, except for the partial remains of a squirrel Arthur, his dog, had caught yesterday. The pit bull had eaten most of it before he reluctantly gave the rest to JD to cook and eat. Grunted JD. Feeling like he'd been cheated out of a conversation, the diner owner dropped the plate with the next cheesesteak on the ancient, cracked lime green Formica tabletop. JD continued to ignore his host, staring blankly into the racks of gum and mints Charlie had accumulated over the years. Most of the stuff he acquired at a flea market wholesale or from shady product testers. Shilling snacks no one ever heard of. The entire rack had long since passed its freshness date. And that, thought JD, could sum up his entire philosophy of man's society. Here he was, practically in the middle of the Pine Barrens, in a converted house with no sign, a dilapidated pool table, and no neighboring business for miles, and the humans were still trying to sell him, still pushing their civilization as the end-all, be-all, like desperate carnival barkers in the middle of the desert. Laughed Charlie's fry cook. The cook was a perpetually sweaty man in a stained polyester sports jacket and mismatched pants. A cigarette dangled precariously from his quivering bottom lip, and JD noticed the faint taste of ash in his sandwich. "Vidal," Charlie chided the cook, "get the stove cleaned up. We got a dinner rush." JD made a scoffing sound, as if the owner was being more than overly optimistic. The burly hermit chewed and pondered his winter accommodations for this, the one hateful time of year he left a brace. This would be his 3rd winter in Sea Isle, thanks to Mrs. K, the old land developer he saved from the forest fire 4 years ago. He was able to live there rent-free while watching her summer home, no questions asked. JD left the place so clean that by the time she returned in April, she wondered if he took her up on the offer at all. But to the devil's shame, he did, living in the desolate streets of Sea Isle while the snow howled across the lonely waves and the streets became so empty the town didn't bother to plow them or keep the street lamps lit. JD spent most of his time in Mrs. K's library, surrounded by the musty smell of old leather and the walls of books, until the spring thaw sent him skulking back to his beloved pines. "This your dog?" asked the officer, with Arthur in tow. Arthur had been sitting patiently outside and was, like JD, not normally disposed to being led. But the hungry pit bull figured any chance to get closer to the smell of meat was a good one, and he happily let the officer guide him inside. JD didn't turn to face the officer, but stopped in mid-bite of his sandwich to respond. "So what if it is?" he asked, annoyed at having his meal interrupted. "We got leash laws in this state," explained the cop like he was talking to a child. "Needs a license, too."
He have his shots? Yeah. Well, look, why don't we just head down to the station and fill out the forms? Won't cost you much. I'm eating lunch. Go away. The giggling polyester fry cook found this last statement hilarious. The cop frowned. Mister, said the officer determinedly, I don't like your attitude. When a police officer says go, you go, and that's that. You mean when you say go, I should go because people should listen to you? You like wearing that uniform. You like telling people what to do. Well, said J.D., finally turning around and letting a tuft of hair fall across his face, I don't like listening. The officer shifted his weight and unbuckled the clasp on his holster. He was considering what the pit bull might do if he arrested J.D. The hermit felt himself tensing up at the impending violent confrontation. He couldn't let the officer take him. He wouldn't go back to the barred windows and the drab walls of hell. He'd never let them take Arthur. For the dog, it would mean a death sentence. Arthur's surprised yelp gave the ghost away. That's how J.D. knew they were real. When the animals would get spooked, J.D. stood fast enough to knock over the table. Like the others in the diner, he stared in stunned silence. She was an aging beauty, perhaps mid-30s, dressed in a rotting, mud-soaked dress. In one hand, she pulled a double-headed axe out, its handle warped from weeks in the swamp. In the other, a dirty clump of brown hair which ended in her pale, lifeless head, and a mildew-covered stump. The top of her neck was just a moldy, jagged wound, which issued bubbling and sucking sound as her severed vocal cords matched the movement of her speech. "Collect my Hayden," she hissed. "Collect my Hayden." "Vidal, you see that?" gasped Charlie. Vidal had stooped below the countertop to open a new package of handy wipes when the commotion started. The officer turned back towards J.D., but he and Arthur were already gone. The movement of the back door, the only evidence that he had ever even been there. Likewise, a headless woman seemingly disappeared. "What in the hell was that?" said the officer aloud. "We all saw it." "You ever hear of the story of the headless wizard?" replied Charlie, remembering his grandfather's tale. "Sold his soul to the devil for his dark power. Maybe the devil's collecting." And the fry cook laughed at nothing in particular. Some distance away, J.D. and Arthur hurried through a marshy section of the Pines. If he could make it to Egg Harbor before nightfall, he could catch the bus to Sea Isle. Suddenly, the mud and water erupted in front of J.D. Arthur barked ferociously as the headless corpse rose from the algae-choked spot. J.D. was familiar with the many ghosts in the Pines, but she was new. The air around them became charged, just like before a thunderstorm. He knew at once that they were very close to the scene of her death. It was the only way the spirit so young would have that much power. "Collect my Hayden." "Go away, dead woman," ordered J.D., "and keep your corpse in its grave where it belongs." "Not while he lives." "I don't know what other ghosts have told you," J.D. explained, "but I am not your instrument of vengeance. I've damned myself enough in this life to heft your burden of sins. Now leave me alone!" The disembodied head wailed a soul shriek that startled even the veteran ghost spotter like J.D. The roots of a partially submerged cedar wriggled with unnatural liveliness. J.D. leapt out of their path, only to realize that they were not reaching for him. "Arthur!" The pit bull struggled, but the jaws were little match for the dead wood which enveloped it like a choking ivy. As the dog was pulled into the muck, J.D. dove, sticking his arm out just in time for the animal to latch onto his sleeve. The fabric gave way, and the canine disappeared into the murky depths. J.D. whirled around, but the headless woman was gone. "Bring him back!" "Collect my Hayden." "I'll do as you say," J.D. reluctantly spat. "But if I bring this Hayden, you must release my friend unharmed." The disembodied head surfaced in the deepest pond of the swamp to J.D.'s right. He turned in time to see Arthur surface, completely encased in roots. "Who are you?" demanded J.D. The filmy, mud-stained eyes rolled back into the woman's head, and J.D. was overwhelmed by her vision of death. Falling to his knees, he strained to see her painful story. Rosalind was a bright, youthful woman with her whole life ahead of her, but a man as useful and bright took it all away. His name was Hayden Burrow, a traveling salesman with charm and good looks. He convinced Rosalind a night in the Pines would be romantic. He beheaded her with an axe shortly before getting out of the car. Afterwards, he unceremoniously dumped her in the swamp, and thus she became another of the hundreds of souls haunting the Pine Barrens. But young and foolish spirit she was, Rosalind still thought she needed her body to move around. J.D. could see her soul self below the corpse, struggling to move the long dead vehicle of her torso and limbs. "How do I find him?" J.D. asked, a bit drained from the experience. There was a gurgling sound. J.D. turned and watched the water inside his muddy footprint cough up a wallet photo of Hayden and a torn driver's license. Although Hayden's name had been torn from the license, the address was still clear. "Now go!" Several hours later, J.D. was trudging down the desolate backways of the Pines on the way to the Woodbine address. By chance, he stumbled upon a young woman who had broken down with her car. J.D. thought about heading off into the woods to avoid her, but he didn't want to look even more suspicious. He planned to walk right by her, but she was more friendly than sensible. "Hi," she called. "Did you break down too? If you can give me a hand, I'll give you a ride." "Which way are you going?" "South, towards the college. I go to Stockton." J.D. took a few steps back and looked at the engine. "I'm Sarah, by the way," she smiled pleasantly. "You live around here?" "Yes," said J.D., examining the carburetor. "Do you think just because this is a desolate area that it is any less dangerous?" "Well, no," she admitted. "But if you were going to hurt me, you would have snuck up on me, right?" J.D. got behind the wheel and turned the engine over. I'm not the kind of person that discriminates against someone solely based on their looks," she bragged. "See, you fix it. I'm a great judge of characters." "Actually," informed J.D., "you're not. The payphone's 6 miles that way." J.D. took off in the opposite direction, tossing the naive co-ed her purse as he did so. Burroughs' house rested on a well-shaded street shrouded in ancient oak and pines. Most of his lawn was a mossy, neglected patch of dirt, the plants having been long deprived of their life-giving rays of the sun. J.D. broke in through the basement window. The cellar was a neatly arranged workshop with a clearly arranged rack of tools, a spotless workbench, and a brand new tabletop vise. J.D. was heading upstairs in the house when he noticed a box full of junk. It seemed oddly out of place in this orderly environment. He went back down the steps and examined it. It contained a rusty carpenter's plane, an English-Latin dictionary, a framed picture of a sailboat, a black computer disk, an earring, and a gardener's spade. The upstairs was just as neat. Early American furniture with polished dark wood and cushions, and the fabric still clean and crisp as it was when it was purchased. This home was obviously well tended, but it felt disconnected somehow, as if the person who occupied it didn't want to take the risk of personalizing it with decoration. Finally, he came to the neatly arranged desk containing papers, business documents, and a newly renewed driver's license. J.D. saw the number when the realization hit him. Unfortunately, Hayden had hit him too. When J.D. came to, he found himself in the pristine basement again, only this time things weren't so neat. He was handcuffed to a water pipe a few feet away from the workbench. The back of his head was throbbing, and a small kitchen fire extinguisher lay on the floor by his feet. Nearby, Hayden sparked a blowtorch to light and adjusted the flame. Hayden was neat and careful as his house. He wore a workman's smock over a pair of brand new overalls. He had neatly cropped his hair and meticulously shaved his face. He was young, charming, on the fast-track type. Nobody ever suspected he'd jaywalk, much less murder people. "You know, I can legally kill you," said the killer, amused at his good fortune. "I mean, there's really nothing anyone can do. You broke into my house. I feel so violated." "Torture isn't exactly self-defense, and I didn't break in. I was sent here." "Really?" smiled Hayden, amazed one victim could be so entertaining. "Who sent you? I bet it was that bitch from San Diego. She almost ruined everything with that indictment." "Rosalind sent me to collect you." "Huh," he replied, the fun suddenly gone from the room. "Now that's funny. Rosalind. What are you, her brother or something?" "Something." "Well, Mr. Something," Hayden sneered, now annoyed, "as soon as I weld the steel plate over the basement window you broke, I'm going to do a little welding on you. Just as Hayden turned away, JD struck, lifting his right foot up and slamming it down on Hayden's hand as it passed over the open vise. With his other foot, he smacked the lever in the newly greased vise, tightening it in place before Hayden could get his hand out. JD tightened it with a few more turns, and Hayden dropped the torch and moaned in agony. "Oh, God," he whined. "You are so effing dead. Give me the keys." "They're upstairs." JD kicked the lever, giving the vise a half turn. Hayden writhed. "Then you're in a world of S. Give me the goddamn keys." It took another half turn, but Hayden finally handed JD the handcuff keys, and the angry hermit freed himself. He calmly turned off the blowtorch. "What kind of car you got?" "Come on, man," he squealed, gesturing to the vise. JD smacked him across the head with the torch and repeated, "What kind of car you got?" "It's the blue Escort. The keys are in the kitchen now." It took 2 more hits with the torch before Hayden finally slumped over. JD heard some bones snap as the weight of his body pulled against the vise. Undoing the vise, JD made a makeshift bandage from some duct tape. A few minutes later, he was driving out of Woodbine with Hayden tied up in the trunk. Halfway back to the diner, JD spotted the fry cook hitchhiking in the opposite direction. They made eye contact, despite the darkness, for just a split second. Vidal laughed and watched the Escort fade into the distance. Hayden was still groggy as JD dragged him into the woods. He brought the blowtorch. The dim blue flame gave off just enough light to make his way. "What are you going to do? Show me the body? I've seen it. Go ahead and kill me," defied Hayden. "You think I care?" "I can't kill you here, and yes, you do care. You care a great deal. You can't stand the thought of getting old, can you? That's why you killed all those people, because you can't kill yourself, and you can't stop yourself from aging." "You're full of ass." JD held a box of junk. "Don't lie to me. I found your trophies," spat JD, "and I know why she wants you here." And with that, the mud burst open and Rosalind rose forth. Arthur rose up behind her. "Hayden," she gurgled. "Oh my God!" "Hayden, give him to me." "Let go of the dog." The ghost seemed to hesitate for a moment, but with her goal so close at hand, she faltered and released the pit bull. The dog scrambled to his feet. "Now give me..." JD tossed the blowtorch, striking the rotting corpse in the hand and igniting the hair on the disembodied head. Hayden broke free from the hermit's grasp and ran as fast as his legs would carry him. "Arthur, fetch!" Instinctively, the pit bull grabbed the head as Rosalind's body fumbled and let it go. Roots sprang forth in random directions, reaching for the hermit and Hayden at odd angles. The headless body stumbled through the forest. "Hayden! Hayden!" gasped the disembodied head. JD made it to the safety of a blacktop highway on the border of the pines. The blue Escort was parked just across the street, and Hayden, who had broken the driver's side window, was trying to start it. JD took the head from Arthur's jaws. "Why? Why?" it moaned. "You know why," said JD. "This wasn't Hayden's driver's license you gave me. It was yours. You lived with him. You murdered him. You didn't want him here for revenge. You wanted him to die in the pines so you could be trapped for eternity together, so you could continue to kill." As JD tossed the head into the center of the road, a loaded semi came barreling down the road. Rosalind's head pleaded for the body to stop, but it was too late. The truck ran down the headless body, causing it to burst into a million muddy pieces. JD watched as Rosalind's self reduced its haunting to just the head. He walked over and pressed the crying, muddy face into the muck where it wouldn't be found for a millennia. Hayden got out of the Escorts, confident the worst was over. "Man, I don't know how to thank you," he laughed. "What now? You turn me into the cops, I guess. I'll go along quietly. It's the least I can do." JD drew a weathered .45 from his jacket pocket and aimed it at Hayden's head. "Wait a minute. You said you wouldn't..." "I said I couldn't kill you in the pines." The retort of the pistols echoed through the pines as the lifeless body of Hayden fell back into the brush. The angry hermit took a long last look at Rosalind's soul self, nothing more but a ghostly head whispering with ephemeral vocal cords in a voice that no one could hear. J.D. heard the comforting pine needles crunch beneath his feet, and then the giggling laugh of the fry cook. "You do nice work," laughed Vidal, taking Hayden's body by the feet. "I know who you are," said the hermit, shooting an angry glance. "Vidal." "I suppose you would, wouldn't you?" he smiled, dragging Hayden into the darkness. "Until the next time, huh?" And J.D. and Arthur headed towards Sea Isle for the winter. It would be colder this year. The most chilling winter yet. So, anyhow, that's the story. I hope you enjoyed it. Happy Halloween, everybody!